December 5th, 1945. The war is over. The world is breathing again. 5 Navy bombers sit on the runway at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, fully fueled, armed with practice bombs, and ready for a routine training flight, the kind that had been flown hundreds of times before. But before sunset, every one of them would vanish.
This is FT-28. Both of my compasses are out. I don't know where we are. Can you identify your position? What is your heading? We can't see land. Everything looks wrong.
5 planes, 14 men, and not a trace of any of them was ever found. Some called it bad luck. Others blamed the weather. But the story of Flight 19, it became something else entirely. The beginning of a legend, buried somewhere out there in the blue. Welcome back to Greetings from Florida. I'm your host, Joe Torino, and tonight we're taking to the skies for one of Florida's greatest mysteries. 5 Navy bombers, 14 men, a routine flight that never made it home. From the runways of Fort Lauderdale to the endless blue of the Atlantic, this is the Vanishing Squadron, the mystery of Flight 19.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This message is for Norwegian passengers traveling on Norwegian flight DY7114 with service to Rome.
If you've ever flown out of Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport, you've already stood on haunted ground.
Please make your way to gate 138.
Those runways beneath your flight to Atlanta or New York, they're the same strips of Florida concrete where 5 Navy bombers lifted off in 1945 and never came back. Before it was ticket counters and TSA lines, this was Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, born in 1942 when the U.S. Navy took over a little airfield called Merrill Fogg Airport. Almost overnight, the place grew into a sprawling training base, hangars, barracks, a hospital, and runways long enough to launch war. Here they trained the whole crew, pilots, radio men, gunners, mechanics, for the Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bomber. Navy carrier crews flew them at sea, and Marine squadrons flew them from shore. It was hard, dangerous work. From 1942 to 1946, 94 trainees lost their lives here, 14 of them on a single flight that would become legend. Flight 19. Among the young flyers who made it through was a 20-year-old named George Herbert Walker Bush. Future president, then just another Navy kid trying to keep an Avenger in the sky. He graduated here in 1943, back when this base buzzed from dawn to dusk with training flights over the Atlantic. And by December 1945, with the war finally over, Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale was still running routine training flights, one of which would vanish without a trace. Life here swung between boredom and adrenaline. You'd wake up to reveille, choke down powdered eggs, sweat through a briefing, and then spend hours over the Atlantic practicing torpedo runs on coral reefs. At night, the bars on US 1, and a hotel called the Riviera, where pilots carved their names into the walls. Locals called them the Avenger Boys. They were loud, reckless, and sure they'd live forever. Leading Flight 19 was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, U.S. Naval Reserve. 28, combat tested, and confident. He'd flown Avengers off carriers in the Pacific, the Hancock and the Enterprise, and somehow came home without a scratch. With about 2,500 hours, most of them in Avengers, Taylor was no rookie. He'd recently transferred from Miami, where he'd been an instructor, and this was his first training hop from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale. Some said he was a natural. Others said he didn't trust the local charts. Either way, the orders had his name on them. The plane Taylor commanded was called an Avenger, a 33-foot, 17,000-pound flying tank built for one thing: carrying torpedoes straight into the fight. Under the cowling was a Wright Cyclone engine that could drag it through anything short of a hurricane. 3 men packed inside: pilot, radio man, and gunner, surrounded by the smell of oil, canvas, and nerves. It was slow but steady, built tough enough to take a beating and still bring its crew back alive. Most of the time. There were 5 planes that day. 5 Avengers lined up on the runway, each crewed by 3 Navy men or Marines, most of whom had logged around 300 hours in the air, only about 60 of those in the Avenger itself. They were still finding their rhythm in the sky, learning to trust the Avenger and the men around them. Leading the group, Flight Leader FT-28 was Lieutenant Taylor. His crew, Gunner George Francis Devlin and Radioman Walter Reed Parpart Jr., both U.S. Naval Reserve. Behind him in FT-36, Captain Edward Joseph Powers, U.S. Marine Corps, a young but confident pilot flying a TBM-1C. His 2 Marines, Sergeant Howell Orrin Thompson, a gunner, and Sergeant George Richard Peonesa, a radioman. In FT-81, Second Lieutenant Forrest James Gerber, U.S. Marine Corps, flew with a single crewman, Private First Class William Lightfoot. Their usual radioman, Corporal Alan Cosner, had been excused from the exercise that morning, a small decision that likely saved his life. FT-3, flown by Ensign Joseph Tipton Bossy, U.S. Naval Reserve, carried gunner Herman Arthur Thielander and radioman Bert E. Ballock, both seamen first class. And the last plane, FT-117, Captain George William Stivers, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps pilot, Sergeant Robert Francis Gallivan, gunner, and Private Robert Peter Grubel, radioman. Most were barely out of high school, kids who'd grown up on war news and wanted their turn in the sky. For them, this wasn't danger, it was routine. Just another training run they'd brag about later over a beer and forget by morning. But this one they'd never get a chance to forget. Shortly after 2 o'clock that afternoon, December 5th, 1945, the 5 TBM Avengers sat idling on the tarmac at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, ready for a routine training flight called navigation problem number 1. It was a combination of bombing and navigation practice that other crews had already completed that day. Each plane was a General Motors built version of the Grumman Avenger, the TBM 1C, the 1E, and the 3 models, fully fueled and armed with dummy bombs for target runs. During pre-flight checks, they found all 5 planes were missing clocks. It wasn't a concern. Everyone figured each pilot had a watch. The lesson was dead reckoning, flying by math, compass, and gut. The schedule had them airborne by 1:45 p.m., but Taylor arrived late, pushing takeoff to 2:10. Outside, the weather was listed as favorable, sea state moderate to rough. In Navy speak, that's just another Florida afternoon. The exercise was a triangle over the Atlantic. The first leg, fly east on a heading of 091 for 56 nautical miles to a coral reef called Hens and Chickens Shoals, or Chicken Rocks. There they'd make practice bombing runs just above the waves. Second leg was continue another 67 miles east before turning north to course 346 for 73 miles, passing over Grand Bahama Island. The third leg was turn left onto heading 241 for 123 miles back towards the Florida coast. After that, the Avengers would swing home to Fort Lauderdale, exercise complete, logbook signed, and dinner by 6. Simple geometry, clear skies. Every crew in training had flown this same route. There was no reason to think Flight 19 would be any different. At 2:10 p.m., Flight 19 rolled onto runway 4. 5 Avengers accelerated in formation, their prop wash flattening the palmettos along the fence. The tower at Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale logged the departure as routine. No issues, no delays. 5 silver birds climbing east into a sky so bright it hurt to look at. They were expected back by 5 o'clock. Instead, by 6, Fort Lauderdale was calling into silence. 5 planes left this runway that day, and not a single trace has ever been found. Not a wingtip, not a raft, not a body, just their voices fading into the static.
This is FT-28. Both of my compasses are out. I don't know where we are.
But that comes later. First, let's follow them into the air. By mid-afternoon, Flight 19 was right on schedule. 5 TBM Avengers had just finished their bombing runs over the Hens and Chickens Shoals and were turning northeast towards Grand Bahama Island, the second leg of their training group. Back at NAS Fort Lauderdale, the weather looked fine. Then, at 3:45, another instructor flying nearby caught something strange on his radio. Lieutenant Robert Cox, call sign Foxterre 74, was wrapping up his own training hop when a faint, broken voice drifted through the static.
Foxterre 74 to Nan Howe Able 1. There seems to be either a boat or plane lost and is calling towers. Suggest you inform tower of it. Over. Nan Howe Able 1. Roger. Foxterre 74, plane or boat calling towers. Please identify yourself so someone can help you.
At first, Cox wasn't sure what he was hearing. Just a lost voice somewhere over the open water. Minutes later, that voice came back, clearer this time. It was Lieutenant Charles Carroll Taylor, the instructor leading Flight 19.
Does anyone have any suggestions? I think we must be over the keys. This is Foxtrot 74 calling the lost plane or boat. Please identify yourself. Over. Roger, this is Foxtrot 28. Both my compasses are out and I'm trying to find Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm over land, but it's broken. I'm sure I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale.
Taylor sounded calm, methodical, but what he said sent a chill through the tower. If he was over the Keys, he'd flown nearly 100 miles off course.
If you're in the Keys, put the sun on your port wing and fly up the coast until you reach Miami. Then Fort Lauderdale is 20 miles farther. What is your altitude? I'll head south to meet you. I know where I am now. I'm at 2,300 feet. Don't come after me. Roger. Coming up to meet you anyhow.
Taylor didn't want rescue. He wanted confirmation. He'd flown combat in the Pacific. His instincts were strong. But both compasses were dead. And instinct alone can't point north.
Fort Lauderdale Tower, this is Foxtrot 74. Flight of 5 planes. Leader is Foxtrot 28. He has emergency IFF equipment on. Can he be picked up on Fort Lauderdale radar? Negative, he can't be picked up on Fort Lauderdale radar gear. Roger. FP-28, turn on your ZBX. Have a pilot with a good compass take the lead.
Taylor's reply faded in and out through static.
Radar. Something wrong. We're at 4,500 feet.
The tower called every base on the Florida coast. Pensacola, Jupiter, Miami, but no one could get a fix. Taylor's voice was slipping further and further away.
We just passed over a small island. No other land in sight. Visibility 10 to 12 miles. I'm at 3,500 feet. Emergency IFF on. Does anybody have radar that can pick us up? Foxtrot 28 suggests you have another pilot with a good compass take the lead and guide you back to the mainland. Roger. If we just fly west, we'll get home, damn it. If we just fly west.
The younger pilots could feel it, the pull of instinct, but Taylor believed they were over the Keys. Heading west would only take them deeper out to sea.
One of the planes in the flight thinks if we went 270, we could hit land.
5 Avengers hung in the sky, chasing a horizon that no longer made sense. They thought Florida was behind them, but it was still out there, somewhere beyond the rain. By 4 o'clock, Flight 19 had been off course for more than half an hour. The men still trusted Lieutenant Taylor, but their instruments told a different story. And somewhere between the clouds and the static, even Taylor began to doubt himself.
We went out on the heading of 120. The second leg I took over because I thought they were going wrong, but I know it's my compasses that are wrong.
It was the first crack in Taylor's confidence, a confession broadcast live over military airwaves.
Foxtrot 28, do you have a YG disc for homing DF?
The tower was begging for anything, a homing signal, a bearing, a clue. But the squadron was flying blind. Messages shot up and down the coast. Fort Lauderdale ordered every direction finder from Miami to Pensacola detuned to 4805 kilocycles. Everyone was listening. No one could find them.
Foxtrot 28 to Naval Able 3. We're heading 030 for 45 minutes, then we'll fly north to make sure we're not over the Gulf of Mexico.
That decision sealed their fate. Heading 030 northeast would take them farther out over the Atlantic.
All planes in this flight join up in close formation. Let's turn and fly east 2 degrees. We're going too damn far north instead of east.
Taylor's frustration was showing. He'd lost his bearings, lost radio clarity, and now, maybe, the faith of his men.
Foxtrot 28 to all planes in flight. Change course to 090 for 10 minutes.
090, due east. But out there meant only more ocean.
We didn't go far enough east. How long have we been going east? Foxtrot 28, this is Naval Able 3. Go ahead. I receive you very weak. We're now flying 270. Roger.
Some of the younger pilots, like Captain Powers and Stivers, had started to break ranks. 270 was west, towards home, but Taylor was still convinced they were on the Gulf side, flying the opposite direction.
Planes fly close formation. When the first man gets down to 10 gallons of gas, we'll all land in the water together. Does everyone understand that?
It was the last clear order from Flight 19. In less than an hour, the sky would swallow them. 5 Avengers, 14 souls, and no trace. As it became clear Flight 19 was lost, every available base, ship, and aircraft along the Florida coast was alerted. At first, a consolidated PBY Catalina took off just after 6 p.m., scanning the waves for any signs of the Avengers. But when darkness fell, 2 larger aircraft, marked PBM Mariner flying boats, were diverted from their own training missions to join the search. Their orders were to fly a square pattern over the waters west of 29 degrees north, 79 degrees west, about 160 miles east of Daytona Beach. One of them, PBM 5 Bruno 59225, belonged to Training Squadron 49 and launched from Naval Air Station Banana River at 7:27 p.m. The base sat just south of Cape Canaveral, where Patrick Space Force Base stands today. At 7:30, the Mariner made a routine check-in call and was never heard from again. At 9:15, the tanker SS Gaines Mills reported seeing a flash on the horizon. A column of fire rising 100 feet into the air, burning for 10 minutes straight. When the crew reached the coordinates, 28.59 degrees north, 80.25 degrees west, they found nothing but an oily sheen and drifting aviation fuel. The nearby carrier USS Solomons confirmed it had lost radar contact with an aircraft at the exact same moment. Flying boats like the Mariner had a reputation. Sailors called them flying gas tanks. They carried nearly 10 tons of aviation fuel, and under rough conditions, their flexible fuel lines could leak. The Navy's final report concluded that PBM-5 Buno 59225 probably suffered a mid-air explosion. In the same span of one evening, 27 men vanished, 14 aboard Flight 19 and 13 aboard the crew sent to save them. No wreckage, no survivors, just static and the sound of rain over the Atlantic. By midnight, the Atlantic was crawling with searchlights. Engines hummed above the waves. Ships crisscrossed the coordinates where Flight 19 should have been, but all they found was open sea. The Navy called it the largest air-sea search in history. 300 planes, 21 ships, every base from Miami to Norfolk sent someone into the storm. They flew grid after grid, eyes straining through the rain and static for a flicker of light or a floating wing. Some pilots swore they saw flares in the distance, others patches of oil glimmering like black glass in the moonlight. But when they circled back, nothing, only foam and shadow. When morning broke, the searchers expected wreckage. A seat cushion, a fuel tank, something. Instead, there was silence. The sky was empty. The sea was calm again. The ocean had swallowed 27 men without a trace. In the days that followed, the press called it the Lost Patrol. Families waited by the docks for telegrams that never came, and when the official reports failed to explain what the Atlantic had done, the questions only grew louder. In the weeks that followed, the Navy launched a full investigation. 5 planes, 14 men, no wreckage, no witnesses. Just radio transcripts, weather charts, and theories scribbled across hundreds of pages of reports. The board's findings filled more than 500 pages. Their conclusion? Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor, a decorated combat veteran, had simply gotten lost. According to the report, Taylor believed the small islands below him were part of the Florida Keys, when in reality, they were the Bahamas. Thinking he was over the Gulf of Mexico, he turned northeast, convinced it would bring the squadron back toward Florida, but it only carried them farther into the Atlantic. The investigation also suggested that at least some of the men knew where they were. Their radio calls made it clear. They wanted to fly west, back toward the mainland, but Taylor overruled them, trusting his instincts over his instruments. And when both compasses failed, instinct was all he had left. The report mentioned another problem. Taylor never switched to the emergency search frequency. The training channel was noisy, full of static and interference from Cuban radio, but it was the only one his men could hear, and that decision may have sealed their fate. The Navy didn't blame Taylor for the compass failures, and the loss of the rescue plane, the PBM 5 Mariner, was written off as a fuel explosion. For the Navy, the math was simple: navigational error, mechanical failure, and bad weather. But that answer didn't sit right with everyone. After Taylor's mother protested, the report was amended. The official cause was rewritten. Just 2 words, though they felt heavier than 100 pages of paperwork. Cause unknown. For some, that was closure. For others, it only deepened the mystery. When the paperwork stopped, the whispers started. Stories about a corner of the Atlantic where compasses lose their way, and men do too. They called it a corner of the Atlantic, but soon it would have a name that would turn the tragedy into legend. In 1964, nearly 20 years after Flight 19 disappeared, a writer named Vince Gaddis published an article in Argosy magazine called The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. He connected the dots: Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, and drew a triangle across the map. Inside that shape, he said, ships and planes vanished without explanation. Outside it, the world still made sense. A decade later, author Charles Berlitz turned that idea into a phenomenon. His 1974 bestseller, The Bermuda Triangle, mixed fact with speculation. Electromagnetic storms, alien abductions, even the power of Atlantis beneath the sea. It sold millions, and with it, the triangle became more than a mystery. It became mythology.
Vanished in the Bermuda Triangle. No records found. The Devil's Triangle.
By the 1970s, every new disappearance between Florida and Bermuda fed the legend. The Navy freighter USS Cyclops lost in 1918 with over 300 men aboard. The airliners Star Tiger and Star Ariel vanished in the late 40s. A DC-3 that disappeared en route to Miami with 27 passengers. Each one added another ghost to the map. To some, the triangle was a myth stitched together from coincidence and fear. To others, it was proof that something about this place defied logic. The simplest theory is the most human one. Error. Taylor misread the islands below him, confused the Bahamas for the Keys, and when his compasses failed, he trusted his gut instead of the math. Had he turned west when his men urged him to, Flight 19 probably would have made landfall near Cape Canaveral. Instead, they flew northeast, straight out to sea, until the fuel ran dry. Later recreations of the flight path show that Taylor's wrong west carried them hundreds of miles past safety. A tragedy of confusion, not curse. But others point to something stranger. Flight 19's compasses didn't just drift, they spun. This part of the Atlantic lies near the agonic line, where magnetic north and true north briefly align and then separate again. For pilots relying on analog gauges and dead reckoning math, it's a perfect trap. Some believe these magnetic distortions could explain other disappearances in the triangle. a quirk of physics, not the paranormal, but still enough to make the ocean feel haunted. Then there's the weather. Over the Bahamas, a squall can form out of clear sky. Zero visibility, violent updrafts, the Gulf Stream ripping beneath. If Flight 19 hit that kind of storm low on fuel, they could have gone down fast, and the current would erase any trace by morning. It's harsh, but possible. The Atlantic doesn't always keep souvenirs. Of course, some believe the triangle is more than weather and magnetism. They believe that it's a portal. Stories from pilots and sailors speak of spinning clouds and green lightning, of gauges going wild before a flash of silence. A few claim they passed through what felt like a tunnel in time, vanishing for minutes or hours before their radios crackled back to life. To believers, these so-called magnetic vortexes are gateways, folds in reality that swallow whatever crosses them. To scientists, it's just turbulent air and electrical interference playing tricks on the senses. Either way, those who've flown through that stretch of sky say it feels different. But what if Flight 19 didn't crash at all? What if they went somewhere else? In the years after the disappearance, the story of those 5 Avengers began drifting out of the Navy's archives and into the imagination. Some said they were taken, lifted from the sky by something not of this earth. UFO enthusiasts pointed to what wasn't found. No wreckage, no oil slick, not even a floating life vest. They said the men had been collected, caught mid-flight in a beam of light, pulled somewhere beyond reach. It sounds far-fetched, until Hollywood gave it a face. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Steven Spielberg opened with a haunting image: the planes of Flight 19 sitting in perfect condition in the Sonoran Desert, fuel tanks full, crews long gone. By the film's end, a group of naval aviators in crisp World War II uniforms step off of an alien aircraft, unchanged by time. It wasn't proof, but it was enough to cement Flight 19 as one of pop culture's favorite UFO cases, a mystery that refused to age. But not everyone looked to the skies for answers. Some believe the real power that swallowed Flight 19 came from below. Long before anyone coined the phrase Bermuda Triangle, mystics and writers claimed that this stretch of ocean hid the ruins of Atlantis, a civilization powered by technology far beyond our own. They said its energy still hummed beneath the waves, creating strange magnetic fields that could cripple instruments and pull ships from the surface without a trace. In the 1930s, the psychic Edgar Cayce predicted that parts of Atlantis would rise again near the Bahamas in the late 1960s. And right on schedule, divers off Bimini stumbled across a long stretch of perfectly straight limestone blocks forming what looked like a sunken road. They called it the Bimini Road, and for believers, that was it. Proof that the lost city was waking up. Scientists say it's natural, a geological formation shaped by tides and time. But sonar teams still return, scanning the seafloor, chasing rumors of pyramids buried in coral, of lightless caverns lined with angular stone. And every time a new echo comes back from the deep, the legend grows. Maybe those power lines from a lost city are just the ghosts of geology. Or maybe, every now and then, they still flicker on, long enough to pull a few more stories into the deep. Today, the runways at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International hum with the sound of passenger jets. Most travelers passing through have no idea that this was once Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, the place where Flight 19 took off for the last time. Where there were once rows of barracks, young pilots, and the deep smell of aviation fuel, only one building from that era remains. Link Trainer Building Number 8. It's small, tucked beside the airport perimeter, but inside, the walls remember. Today, it's home to the Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale Museum. There, under soft light, you can stand before a simple bronze plaque engraved with the names of 14 men, a memorial to Flight 19 and to the 13 who vanished trying to bring them home. It's strange walking that same ground. The breeze moves through the hangars like it's carrying voices from another time. And if you close your eyes, you can almost hear them. 5 Avengers lifting off into the sun, the hum of engines fading east over the water. Maybe the real story of Flight 19 isn't about what was lost, but what was left behind. The mystery, the memory, and the men who still wait somewhere beyond the horizon. So if you ever find yourself at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International, take a short drive down Perimeter Road, stop at the museum, read the names, and remember the day the sky over Florida fell silent. Greetings from Florida is written, researched, and narrated by me, Joe Torino. Sound design and production by yours truly, with original theme music by Modern Mimes. You can find more stories, photos, and episode extras at @FloridaPod on Instagram, and visit FloridaPod.com for links to listen on any platform, plus the official merch store. And if you like what you hear, share the show, leave a review, or tell a friend who loves a little weird with their history. And as always, stay weird, Florida. See you next time.